Crime does not have an age, and when young criminals appear in front of a judge, they are treated based on the severity of their crimes, and some crimes do not deserve any compassion. Here are the youngest unaliver sentences of all time. Hassan Sentamu. In September 2023, 15-year-old Elaine Andam accompanied her friend to meet with Hassan Sentamu. Her friend and Hassan had recently broken up and arranged to meet outside of a shopping centre in Croydon in South London to exchange personal belongings given to each other over the course of the relationship. One of the items Hassan had to return was a teddy bear, which he claimed he did not bring with him that day. During the exchange, when the teddy bear was not given back, Elaine reportedly refused to give Hassan back a bag of his clothes. This started an argument between the two, and Elaine ran away with the bag. Hassan chased her down, cornered her, and began stabbing her repeatedly. He stabbed her over 15 times before fleeing the scene. Emergency responders were called, but they were unable to save Elaine's life. Shortly afterwards, the police narrowed down on Hassan and arrested him for the unaliving. Hassan's defense team claimed diminished responsibility because of the 17-year-old's autism. However, the prosecution noted that Hassan had deliberately carried a knife and gloves with him that day. They also brought a witness, one of Hassan's friends, who claimed that the day before the unaliving, Hassan had claimed that his ex-girlfriend and Elaine had spotted him at the shopping center and teased him. The witness also claimed that Hassan had no intention of returning the teddy bear and had planned out the execution. Hassan did not stand in his defense or offer any explanation. The courtroom was filled with friends and family members of Elaine's, who remembered her as a bright and kind-hearted young girl with aspirations that were taken from her too soon. The court also heard that Hassan came from a dysfunctional background, but that he had run-ins with the law before. At age 12, he was expelled for bringing a knife to school. He had disciplinary issues, particularly with girls, and was also accused of getting into a fight with a young man while in juvenile correction, awaiting sentencing. The judge noted the severity of the crime, the fact that Hassan stabbed Elaine enough times to make sure she had passed away, and also raised concerns over the growing cases of violence against young girls and women. The judge decided, taking everything into consideration, that Hassan be sent to prison for life with a minimum term of 23 years. Austin Sigg. On October 5, 2012, Jessica Ridgway was supposed to walk to school in the small community of Westminster, Colorado. She never made it to school, and police launched an investigation. 17 days later, investigators found parts of 10-year-old Jessica's decomposing torso on the side of the highway. According to investigators, whoever had unalived Jessica had wanted to create headlines. That same day, police announced they had a suspect in custody, someone who was accused of orchestrating a similar crime less than a few months before Jessica's disappearance. That person was 17-year-old Austin Sigg, who was believed to be a troubled teenager, seeking therapy and other forms of help for his violent and harmful urges. He later confessed to the police that he had abducted Jessica that morning while she was on her way to school, taken her back to his home, unalived her, dismembered her body, and then scattered her remains and belongings across Westminster. Police revealed that just a few months before this, Austin was questioned by the police in connection with a possible kidnapping, where a female jogger claimed someone had tried to take her out with a chemical odor-filled handkerchief, but failed. Austin admitted that he was motivated to commit the crime because he could no longer control his urges. Investigators also found heaps of harmful material related to children on his electronic devices. Austin's defense team claimed that he was only 17 at the time of the crime, and therefore not mature enough to realize the gravity of his actions. However, the prosecution pointed out that Austin had carefully planned out the crime, stalked the victim, and had detailed every aspect. He also dismembered her body and kept parts of Jessica with him as possible trophies. Because of the case's high profile and the severity of the crime, media personnel were not allowed in the courtroom. The prosecutors tried pushing for capital punishment, arguing that Austin was a danger to society. However, because of his young age, he could not be charged with capital punishment. Instead, the judge sentenced him to the next worst thing, a life behind bars with no chance of being paroled. Aiden Fucci. On May 9, 2021, 13-year-old Tristan Bailey was reported missing after she did not return home. Later that same day, her body was found in a wooded area near her neighborhood. As investigators began working through the timeline, they realized that she had met up with 14-year-old Aiden Fucci that day. Surveillance footage showed Tristan walking with Aiden at around 1:45 in the morning. A few hours later, another clip showed Aiden returning alone, carrying his shoes. That immediately raised concern. When authorities searched his home, they found clothing with blood on it in his bedroom and bathroom. A knife was later recovered near the scene, and part of its broken tip was found in Tristan's body during the autopsy. The injuries were severe. Investigators confirmed that she had been stabbed 114 times. In February 2023, just before the trial was set to begin, Aiden pleaded guilty to first-degree unaliving. He was sentenced to life in prison, with a review possible after 25 years because of his age at the time of the crime. James Fairweather. In 2014, 33-year-old James Atfield and 31-year-old Nahid Almanea were unalived. Investigators believed that the same person was responsible for both crimes. Both victims had been stabbed repeatedly. James had been stabbed over 100 times, and Nahid had been stabbed right between the eyes. Both victims were residents of Colchester, Essex. Besides the way they were unalived and where they lived, it seemed like the unaliver had picked his victims at random. This meant that police had a psychopath on their hands. As the investigation narrowed down, investigators realized they were not dealing with a criminal mastermind. Instead, they were dealing with a deranged teenager, 15-year-old James Fairweather. James was a student at Colchester Academy, described as an antisocial child with little to no friends and who was repeatedly picked on. James also suffered from dyslexia and was falling behind in his grades. When questioned by the police, he revealed that the voices had picked his victims and that they laughed, as both James and Nahid tried to fight for their lives. James also had a history of wielding knives at people, including an attempted robbery that same year with a knife. He was one of over 70 suspects questioned in the unalivings, but was released shortly afterward. A year later, James was arrested when he tried to unalive someone again. This time, police caught him with rubber gloves and a knife, intending to target his next victim. In court, his defense team tried to claim diminished responsibility because of his age. However, the prosecution argued that James had not only unalived 2 random people in the most brutal way imaginable, but that he had attempted to do it again. Had he not been caught, James would have gone on to commit several more unalivings. The judge agreed and sentenced him to a life term with a minimum of 27 years served before being eligible for parole. Fernando Parales, Mejia Trinity Bostic, and Fernando Parales Mejia, both 17 and in high school, had started a relationship, much to Trinity's family's disapproval. The 2 teens reportedly ran away from their Macon County homes in June of 2024, and Trinity's family reported her as missing. However, the police claimed that she had run away with her boyfriend and was most likely coming back by herself in a few days. But instead, days later, during a routine litter cleanup in the Hendersonville area, they found Trinity's deceased body. She had been unalived by a single gunshot wound to the head. While Fernando claimed no responsibility, a search of his room found him in possession of Trinity's credit cards, her belongings, and her clothes. Prosecutors also showed dashcam footage from Fernando's vehicle. In one instance, it showed him dumping a bag in the area where Trinity's body was found. In another, he was seen laughing after hearing that Trinity's body was found on the radio. It later emerged that Trinity and Fernando had gotten into an argument, and she had threatened to leave him. Prosecution claimed that Fernando grew enraged and unalived her. He then tried to hide her body and acted as if nothing had happened. The case was delayed for over 2 years, but eventually, the then 19-year-old was found guilty of the crime and sentenced to a life term behind bars. T.J. Lane. On February 27, 2012, 17-year-old T.J. Lane arrived at Chardon High School in Ohio carrying a handgun. He went to the school cafeteria early in the morning, when students were gathered before classes began, and without warning, he opened fire. TJ targeted a group of students sitting together at a table. In total, 3 students were unalived and 3 others were injured. He then fled the school, but was located and arrested shortly afterwards by law enforcement. During the investigation, there was no clear evidence of a complex plan. When the case went to court, TJ pleaded guilty to multiple charges, including aggravated unaliving and attempted unaliving. At sentencing, the shooter showed no remorse. He interrupted proceedings, made gestures toward the victims' families, and used offensive language in court. The judge proceeded with sentencing despite the disruption, and TJ was given 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Michael Shane Bargo. In 2011, 18-year-old Michael Shane Bargo started dating 15-year-old Amber Wright. Amber was previously dating 15-year-old Seth Jackson, but they ended their relationship on bad terms. Seith claimed that Amber had been cheating on him with Michael, and Amber accused him of harming her throughout their brief relationship, a fact prosecutors later proved Amber had fabricated to get Michael's sympathies. In any event, Michael believed her and had words with Seith over his supposed maltreatment of Amber. In April 2011, Michael and Seith had another altercation at Seith's home, which ended with Michael claiming the next time he saw Seith, he would unalive him. He then began plotting Seith's unaliving, enlisting Amber, her brother Kyle, and two friends, Charlie and Austin, to help him in the crime. On April 11th, Amber called Seith to the residence on the pretext of getting back together with him. He arrived at the home and was ambushed by the 5 youths, who then began beating him. This continued for several hours, after which they dragged Seith's body to the bathtub and Michael shot him in the head. They then spent the rest of the night burning Seith's body over an active fire pit. The next morning, Amber and Kyle manipulated their mentally challenged stepfather into helping them dispose of the ashes. When Seith's family realized he was missing, they connected him to Michael immediately and alerted the police. The youths and Amber and Kyle's stepfather were immediately arrested when police found CCTV footage of Seith entering the area, them disposing of the ashes, remains, and belongings of Seith's at the location. The prosecution called it one of the worst crimes Summerfield, Florida, had ever seen and pushed for maximum punishment. The stepfather was charged as an accessory to the crime and sentenced to 30 years. Meanwhile, Amber, Kyle, Charlie, and Austin were sentenced to life in prison. Michael, who had plotted against Seith and actually pulled the trigger, was described as the ringleader and sentenced to capital punishment. He is currently one of the youngest inmates on lethal row in the state of Florida. Gregg. Gregg had only just relocated to Brandon, Mississippi, with her mother, Ashley, and her stepfather, Heath. Ashley had taken a job at Northwest Rankin High School, where 15-year-old Carly was enrolled as a student, and Heath began his physiotherapy practice in the new city. On the outside, everything seemed fine. The three of them seemed like a happy family. However, family members had grown increasingly concerned over Carly's behavior, believing that she needed supervision, especially with the content she consumed online. Carly had also started taking illegal substances and was caught smoking at school. Ashley and Heath tried their best to discipline their daughter, but nothing seemed to work. On the evening of March 19, 2024, however, everything seemed fine. The mother and daughter duo came home from school, Heath was still at work, and everything seemed normal. Surveillance footage from inside the home showed Ashley going into another room after talking briefly with Carly in the kitchen. It later showed Carly sneaking into her parents' bedroom, coming out with something hidden behind her back, and then sneaking into the room where her mother was working on the computer. Moments later, gunshots were heard, and Carly emerged from the room. She then went downstairs to the kitchen, where she texted Heath from Ashley's phone, pretending to be her, and asked him to come home early. At the same time, she texted a friend, claiming that she wanted the two of them to hang out later. When Heath arrived home, he was ambushed by Carly in the doorway. She began shooting at him, but he managed to grab the gun. Carly then took off running through the back door with her friend, and Heath called 911 after discovering Ashley's body. Investigators were able to narrow down on Carly soon enough, and immediately charged her with unaliving her mother and attempting to unalive her stepfather. In court, Carly's defense team argued that she was mentally ill and consumed by homicidal media online, causing her to act out on impulses. The prosecution claimed that surveillance footage from within the home showed that she was careful in planning the attack and that she tried to get away with it. Carly wept in court as the judge sided with the prosecution and sentenced her to serve a life term behind bars. Sarah Marie Johnson. In September 2003, 16-year-old Sarah Marie Johnson stole a semi-automatic weapon, crept into her parents' bedroom, and unalived them. She shot her mother in the head while she was sleeping, and later shot her father in the chest as he was taking a shower. The crime shocked the people of Bellevue, Idaho, who believed the family had no conflicts. But investigators soon realized that Sarah had grown increasingly resentful of her family after they tried to stop her from dating a local substance dealer, 19-year-old Bruno Santos. Sarah believed that the only thing stopping her from pursuing a relationship was that Bruno were her parents, and she decided to end their lives. She tried to claim that someone else had committed the unalivings, claiming someone had broken into the home, that she had been hearing voices, and her defense team tried to argue that she was only 16 and far too young to understand the extent of her actions. However, the judge believed that Sarah knew exactly what she was doing and was only sorry she got caught. For both unalivings, the judge sentenced her to serve 2 consecutive life terms in prison. Lionel Tate. 12-year-old Lionel Tate was at home in Florida with his 6-year-old cousin, Tiffany Unick, while she was being babysat by his mother. The two were left alone downstairs, watching professional wrestling on television while his mother worked on the computer upstairs. Less than an hour later, Lionel went upstairs and told his mother that Tiffany was not breathing. Emergency responders were called, but Tiffany was already gone. Investigators found that the young girl had suffered multiple severe injuries, including a fractured skull, broken ribs, and internal trauma. The level of force used was described as extremely high and not consistent with a simple accident. Lionel told authorities that he was copying wrestling moves he had seen on television. That became the central argument for the defense. There was no intent to unalive, but the prosecution disagreed. They argued that the injuries showed prolonged and repeated force. Based on that, Lionel was charged as an adult with first-degree unaliving. In January 2001, he was convicted at 13 years old, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This made him one of the youngest individuals in the United States to ever receive that sentence. The case quickly became controversial. In 2004, an appeals court overturned the conviction. The court ruled that Lionel's mental competency had not been properly evaluated before trial. After that, he accepted a plea deal. He was released under strict conditions, including house arrest and probation, but that was not the end. In 2005, Lionel was arrested again, this time for armed robbery and violating his probation. He was sent back to prison, where he still is to this day. Adam Lanza. On December 14, 2012, Adam Lanza carried out a shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Connecticut. And what a lot of people do not realize is that this did not start at the school. Earlier that same morning, Adam had already unalived his mother inside their home using one of her legally owned firearms. He then took multiple weapons from the house, including a semi-automatic rifle, and drove to the school. Once he arrived, Adam forced his way into the building by shooting through the glass entrance. He moved through classrooms, targeting both students and staff. In total, 20 children between the ages of 6 and 7, along with 6 adult staff members, were unalived inside the school. As law enforcement began closing in, Adam took his own life inside the school. This meant there was no trial, no courtroom breakdown, no sentencing moment. Everything investigators understood about his motive had to be pieced together afterwards. Investigators later found that Adam had a history of severe social isolation and mental health struggles. He had withdrawn from school, avoided social interaction, and spent most of his time alone. Reports also showed that he had developed an intense interest in mass violence, researching previous attacks and collecting detailed information about them. Adam chose the location, brought multiple weapons, and carried out the attack in a way that suggested he had thought through every step. There was no evidence of a clear, single motive like revenge or personal conflict, which made the case even more unsettling. The aftermath of Sandy Hook had a massive impact. It led to nationwide debates on gun laws, school safety, and mental health. Even years later, the case is still widely discussed, with coverage, emergency response recordings, and investigations continuing to circulate online. Kip Kinkel on May 20th, 1998. 15-year-old Kip Kinkel was suspended from Thurston High School in Oregon after he was caught with a stolen handgun in his locker. The school planned an expulsion hearing. He was sent home, but the situation escalated the same day. That afternoon, Kip used a rifle from his house and unalived his father. Investigators later confirmed that the shooting happened inside the home. After that, Kip moved the body and attempted to cover it. Later that evening, when his mother returned home from work, he met her in the garage and unalived her as well. The next morning, May 21st, Kip went to school armed with a semi-automatic rifle, a handgun, and multiple rounds of ammunition. He hid the weapons under a coat and entered the campus like a normal student. Around 7:55 in the morning, he opened fire. He first shot students outside the school building, then moved further into the campus, including the cafeteria area, where a large number of students were present. He fired multiple rounds in a short span of time. In total, 2 students were unalived and 25 others were injured. The attack did not end because Kip ran out of time or left the scene. It ended because other students physically intervened. As he was attempting to reload his weapon, several students tackled him and held him down until authorities arrived. Kip had shown warning signs before the attack. He had an interest in weapons and had previously built homemade explosive devices. His parents were aware that something was wrong and had taken him to a psychologist, where he was diagnosed with depression and placed on medication. Kip stated that he had been hearing voices that pushed him toward violent actions. His defense team used this to argue mental health issues. However, the prosecution pointed to the sequence of events, including the actions at home and the preparation for the school attack, to show planning and intent. Kip pleaded guilty, and the judge sentenced him to 111 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Aaron Thomas Campbell, the Scottish island, Isle of Bute, is known for two things: its scenic beauty and its close to non-existent crime rate. But that changed in 2018, when 16-year-old Aaron Campbell committed one of the most violent crimes in Scottish history. In the early hours of July 2nd, Aaron broke into Robert MacPhail's home, looking to steal illegal substances that he had previously sold him. Robert lived in the home with his girlfriend Tony, his parents, and also had his 6-year-old daughter, Alessia, visiting over summer break. Aaron did not find the substances he was looking for, but he found Alessia sleeping in her bed. Previously, Aaron had told friends that he wanted to do something extreme. He picked up Alessia, carried her out of the home, into an abandoned building, harmed her, and then unalived her. The next morning, Alessia was reported missing, and investigators soon found her. They also found surveillance footage of Aaron placing him at the scene of the crime and DNA evidence that tied him to Alessia's unaliving. He denied any responsibility, claiming that Tony had unalived Alessia because she did not like Robert's child from a previous relationship. The court quickly learned that this was not true. Aaron had moved to the island when he was 5 years old, but came from a dysfunctional family where there was emotional and physical harm caused by his alcoholic mother. He would also routinely post online about his growing urges to commit crimes, but no one took the 16-year-old seriously. He also tried to set up an online presence as a social media influencer, but was unsuccessful. In court, he claimed that while he might have unalived Alessia, he did it because he was unwell. However, in a later police interview, he accepted full responsibility for the crime and even stated that he was satisfied with the outcome. Because of the heinousness of the crime, the judge was compelled to hand Aaron the maximum sentence, a life behind bars. Joe Ligon. 15-year-old Joe Ligon had practically sealed his fate in 1953 when he, along with 5 other teenagers, went on a spree unaliving in South Philadelphia. The teenagers had been drinking the entire evening and eventually decided to rob people to buy more alcohol. They used knives to threaten their victims, and in the ensuing struggle, 2 people, Charles Pitts and Jackson Ham, were unalived. Joe claimed that he did not unalive the 2 men and accepted responsibility for stabbing another man who had survived the attack. However, because of the laws at the time, all 5 teenagers were tried as adults for first-degree unaliving, even by association, and sentenced to life behind bars without the possibility of parole. Over the next several years, Joe tried to fight his case, but refused an offer of clemency by the governor. Why? Because it would have meant that he would have to stay on parole for the rest of his life. Joe believed he was wrongfully convicted, refused appropriate counsel, and was tried as an adult when he was only a child. In 2016, after a landmark hearing, all cases of juveniles receiving life without parole were retroactively overturned, meaning Joe was finally eligible, but he again claimed that he did not want to be released on probation because of the unconstitutional nature of his arrest. The court agreed, and in 2021, after serving 68 years in prison, Joe was finally released. Robert and Michael Bever neighbors described the Bever family as a reclusive, highly religious group, and that the children barely interacted with anyone outside of the household. David and April homeschool their 5 kids, 3 sons and 2 daughters, and refused to allow them to interact with anyone outside of the home. The Bever family believed that the outside world was corrupted, and that their children would be badly influenced if they were allowed outside. But in July 2015, when one of the children, Daniel Bever, called 911 to report that someone was inside the home, unaliving the family members one by one, he claimed it was his 2 older brothers, Robert and Michael. Robert was 18 at the time of the crime, and Michael was 16. When police arrived at the scene, they found only 2 survivors, 13-year-old Crystal, who had been critically injured with multiple stab wounds, and 2-year-old Autumn, who was hiding in an upstairs room. The others had been unalived with a mix of weapons, some stabbed, some strangled, and some shot. Missing from the home were the two eldest boys, Robert and Michael. The duo was later found after an extensive manhunt in the nearby woods. When questioned, they claimed that they had planned the unaliving for quite some time. Robert claimed that he had earned money by working at a religious call center and that he used that money to buy guns and ammunition online. The brothers also stored other weapons, like box cutters and knives, that they would find around the home to plan the execution. Police also found a flash drive that contained details of the crime, as well as video equipment. The boys claimed that they planned on making 2 videos of the crime. One of the videos would be posted online and would not feature the bodies, and the other video would be played in court and would be filmed while the crime was taking place. Prosecutors also argued that one of the 2 brothers tried to lure the other siblings out of their rooms by pretending that he was being attacked as well. Daniel, the 12-year-old brother who did not survive the attack, saved his sisters by phoning 911 in time. In court, the brothers showed little to no remorse for their actions, compelling the judge to sentence them to life behind bars with no parole eligibility for Robert and parole eligibility after 200 years for Michael. Sheila, Eddy, and Rachel Shoaf, everyone described Skylar Neese as a bright and talented young girl. The 16-year-old was her parents' only child, an honor student, and also an aspiring criminal defense lawyer. Skylar was loved by everyone in the community, and she believed that she had people she could count on around her, such as her best friends, Sheila, Eddy, and Rachel Shoaf. In the early hours of July 5, 2012, Skylar's parents woke up to find their daughter missing. According to surveillance footage, Skylar had left the apartment through the bedroom window and entered a light-colored sedan parked along the side of the road. For a while, investigators believed that she had run away from the household. However, Skylar's parents pointed out that she left almost all of her belongings at home, including her phone charger and contact lenses, signaling that she planned on coming back. Because of laws surrounding Amber Alerts, it took police 48 hours to issue a report that a child was missing. Meanwhile, investigators narrowed down on the sedan and found that it belonged to Sheila. They questioned her, and she claimed that she had, in fact, picked up Skylar along with Rachel that evening, but that they had returned almost an hour later. Investigators could not tie either of the 2 girls to Skylar's disappearance and let them go. 6 months later, however, Rachel reportedly suffered a mental breakdown and confessed everything. She revealed that the girls had grown jealous of Skylar and simply did not like her anymore, which was motive enough for them to unalive her. She claimed that they picked up Skylar that evening, drove about 30 miles from her home, smoked at the site, and then began stabbing Skylar. Rachel also claimed that at some point, Skylar tried fighting back, but that Sheila overpowered her and stabbed her until Skylar stopped moving. The girls came prepared and had a change of clothes in the van along with cleaning supplies. Rachel then led the police to the site where they had attempted to bury Skylar's body. Both girls were sentenced. Rachel got 30 years in prison with parole after 10 years, and Sheila was sentenced to life in prison with parole after serving a minimum of 15 years. The crime also inspired Skylar's law, prompting lawmakers to make changes in how Amber Alerts are issued. McKenzie Shirilla. 17-year-old McKenzie Shirilla was driving with her boyfriend, Dominic Russo, and his friend, Davian Flanagan, in Strongsville, Ohio, in the early hours of July 31st, 2022. The 3 had spent the night together at a party before getting into the car, with McKenzie behind the wheel and the 2 boys as passengers. At around 5:30 in the morning, surveillance footage captured the vehicle driving through local streets. Within minutes, the car accelerated to extremely high speeds, reaching over 100 miles per hour. Seconds later, the vehicle crashed directly into a brick wall. Emergency responders arrived at the scene, but Dominic and Davion were pronounced deceased. McKenzie survived the crash but sustained serious injuries and was taken to the hospital. Initially, the crash was treated as an accident, but as investigators examined the evidence, that changed. Data from the vehicle showed that the accelerator was fully pressed in the moments before impact, with no attempt to slow down. Mechanical failure was ruled out. Investigators also found that McKenzie had driven to the same location days earlier. This raised further questions about whether the crash was intentional. McKenzie told authorities she did not remember the moments leading up to the crash. Her defense argued that it was a reckless driving incident, not an intentional act, but the prosecution disagreed. They argued that the speed, the lack of braking, and the prior visit to the location showed planning. Based on that, McKenzie was charged with multiple counts, including murder. In 2023, she was found guilty. The court concluded that the crash was deliberate. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Ethan Crumbley. 15-year-old Ethan Crumbley was a student at Oxford High School in Michigan when the incident happened on November 30th, 2021. That day started like any other. He was in school, attending classes, and moving through the building with other students. At one point, Ethan went into a bathroom carrying a backpack. A few minutes later, he came out holding a handgun. From there, he walked into the hallway and began shooting as students were passing between classes. The attack unfolded quickly, but in those moments, 4 students were unalived and 7 others, including a teacher, were injured. As the situation escalated, students and staff rushed to secure classrooms and hide. Ethan continued moving through the hallway, firing at people in open areas. Emergency calls began coming in around 12:51 in the afternoon, and within minutes, law enforcement arrived on scene. Ethan was located and taken into custody without resistance. As investigators looked into what happened, more details started to come out. Surveillance footage showed his movements inside the school, and a search uncovered a journal and videos he had recorded before the attack, where he talked about his intentions. One of the most discussed parts of this case is what happened earlier that same day. School staff had raised concerns about Ethan's behavior and drawings, which included violent content. His parents were called in for a meeting, but after that, he was allowed to remain in school. Ethan was charged as an adult with multiple counts, including unaliving and terrorism. In October 2022, he pleaded guilty to all charges. In December 2023, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.